Good morning. I like those number tricks. I'm going to see if I can give him my quota for 2019 and add all of yours to it together and see how close he gets to us making it this year. How about that? Well, good to be here today, and thanks for Ingram for inviting us, and congratulations on the 10th, a full decade of this show. And I think when we look at 10, that's almost how long we've been on the cloud journey. We're almost in our first decade as well. And I think what we wanted to share with you today was to give you a little bit of insight with regards to how we're seeing the market, how it's shaping our investments, and also what lies ahead, not just for you, but also with the help of you as well. At IBM, it's been a very busy year. If I look past the 2018 and 2019 already, we've been rolling at full blast. You know, we've been rolling out new products. We've now got Watson Anywhere, which means you can now beat Jeopardy in your own data center all the way out to the edge as well. We've launched brand new hybrid cloud solutions so that we can really start to focus on some of the key issues that our enterprises are having. We've had a ton of partnerships really bear fruit. We're still the cloud that runs the most VMware workloads. We're actually bringing blockchain to life through TradeLens, which is one of our solutions that we've done with Maersk. We did a joint venture with MasterCard called True Auto, where we're really starting to tackle GDPR for our European clients. And then the momentum that we've had around it, if you look at Vodafone, Lloyds, Santander, Walmart, we really are making cloud front and center in many of our key enterprise accounts as well. Private cloud has been one of our quite hot products. We have over 600 clients running on it today as well. And then we've also been expanding to help clients with our garages on how they come to the cloud also. Big, long list of things that we've done over the past year. Did I miss any? Oh, there's one in the middle here, Red Hat. We just did a $34 billion agreement to acquire them. We're going to talk a little bit about that one today as well. So great year with IBM, and this is starting to show and shape how we're going to build the story here as well. So let's take a look. I think the base premise between IBM's view of the cloud kind of flows in a couple dimensions. First and foremost, we think cloud is right at the point where it is starting to be redefined. I think all of us, we kind of viewed public cloud as what cloud was, our multi-tenant public clouds, our Amazon Azures, our IBM, Google, Alibabas, et cetera. But we started to notice over the past couple of years that that dimension is starting to change and broaden as well. It's almost like the early days of the internet. I can remember back when it was extranet and private internet, and the internet kind of fell all over the place. And it wasn't until we decided to hone in on a handful of standards, HTML, TCP/IP, that it just became the internet. Any URL could be served up, and I really didn't care where the server was behind it. And we feel that we're really at that juncture right now with the cloud as well. The cloud-native capabilities are both on the public cloud. We find dedicated, we find bare metal, we find it coming back in the data center as well. We actually have clients today running Kubernetes on the mainframe as well. We're seeing that with Linux, with Docker, with Kubernetes. These standards are evening the playing field across the board. They're becoming the lingua franca that's bringing both hybrid and multi-cloud to life. One of the things we did this year, we did a lot of work with enterprises to understand how many of their workloads had moved to the public cloud. And only about 20% of those had made it, which to us represented a tremendous amount of opportunity. If 80% of enterprise workloads have yet to move, how do we really bring this hybrid story to life and allow us to capture that? We also did a piece of work on multi-cloud. I think early on we saw a lot of folks deciding to zero in on one primary vendor, but we did a little piece of McKinsey. We interviewed about 150 large major enterprises, and what surprised us is almost every single one is going to be looking at a multi-cloud environment. Anywhere from 2 to 16. Even if you look at some of the large SaaS providers as well, they're becoming clouds in their own right at the same time. So they're going to be dealing with multiple environments, and while that gives them additional choice and keeps them from having vendor lock-in, I think it also raises some of the complexity of the environments that they're dealing with. Where do they place the workload? How do they then manage it? How do they do the security around it? How do I now audit it? Do I even have visibility across a business process? as I start to deal with multiple vendors across the board. So we're a strong believer that both hybrid and multi-cloud are going to be coming into their own, and we also feel that it's going to start writing the next chapter on the cloud journey that we've all been on. The IBM story is fairly straightforward. As we said, we honestly feel that it is going to be a hybrid world. To move more of those enterprise workloads, they need to start moving in the data center where they start today. But then they need to be placed and reside where it makes the most sense, the right cloud for the right workload. It doesn't mean all gravity moves to public. It may be some dynamically move as needed, but let's put the workload where the compute, the specialized services, and the latency and the dependencies match what that piece of code and product needs to do. We do think it's going to be multi-cloud. I think it's a tremendous opportunity on how we simplify that message, how we work across vendors, and how we give singular views around the management and the stabilization of that as well. We think open is going to be critical. We see open kind of shaping this landscape. You know, we talk about Linux, we talk about containers, we talk about Kubernetes, we talk about Istio. We see a lot of the open standards kind of shaping where the vendors are rallying to as well. And what that's because of is what I call the network effect. If I'm really looking at innovation in cloud, we need the largest community possible working around some of these hard problems so that we can move them forward. I don't think any single vendor is going to be the single font of all innovation around these spaces. And this is one of the reasons that we have been contributing heavily to open source. We have lots of contributors within IBM itself, and it's also one of the reasons that attracted us to the Red Hat acquisition as well. Security is going to be key. I think there's new models that are going to start to emerge and new opportunities to be had as well. You know, we're finally getting to the notion that as I start to deal with containers, with finer, granular cloud objects, I can start to secure them in unique ways as well. You know, I started the security division at IBM, and you know, what we tended to find is hackers are lazy. They like to smash the glass and they get everything that they can get. Break into one server, I can probably break into every single one in the data center as well. With containers, I'm starting to deal with a fairly fine-grained unit that I can probably uniquely secure each one of them in their own way. I break into one, the hacker has to start over, figure out how to break into the next one, the next one. They're probably going to give up fairly soon and start to look for a better target there as well. The final part is management. You know, I talked to one enterprise client last week. They already had 130,000 containers in production. And they were wondering, how do I now deal with that complexity? How do I decide where a container resides? Can I see my business process now completely end to end? We need new tools. We need new dashboards. We need new capabilities that are going to give us the optics across my total landscape, both what's running and active in my own data center, what's running and active in my private data centers, what's running in the public clouds as well. So as we looked at this, we had done a lot of work at IBM in the hybrid space. And it became clear to us that to take it even further, that we needed to have an ultra rock solid stack from the server all the way up through our middleware. If we're really going to get those enterprise workloads moving in a cloud direction, we've got to be able to bring a true enterprise-grade experience. We have to bring a service-level agreement that we can stand behind, and we have to offer a quality of service that is both predictable, reliable, and I can really bet my mission-critical workloads on. And this attracted us to Red Hat, you know, and we'll talk a little bit about kind of what we have done over the past year with them through some of our partnerships, and how we think this is really going to address what we think the market is really open for right now, which is a platform that can span all those dimensions of hybrid and also cover all the dimensions of a multi-vendor public world as well. What we like about Red Hat is we've had a long-standing partnership with them for many, many years. You know, they were really the pioneer of commercial open source. If you talk to Jim Whitehurst or Paul Cormier, they'll say, you know, we are a commercial software company where every one of our projects is anchored onto open source. And we like that model. And I think as we move forward, that's going to be one of the critical aspects that we keep and maintain with them. Because their projects being anchored on open, any changes, modifications, new innovation to those flow naturally upstream into the open source community. It gives them the ability to maintain their partnerships with all the cloud vendors so that we can really start to move forward on a multi-cloud strategy. And it gives us some very nice clean boundaries around some of the northbound value that IBM's bringing to the table versus the value that they're bringing to the table as well. We also like the fact that they had really moved quite heavily in the multi-cloud space. Pre-existing relationships with Amazon, with Azure, with Google, with ourselves, with Ali, already working on a platform that could span all of those and also make it fairly seamless as how to move workloads between the various vendors as well. And their customer base is pretty similar to ours. We love their programmer community, and we love what they do in the open source as well. In May of this year, we announced a partnership with them where we took our private cloud, IBM Private Cloud Private, and we layered it on top of their OpenShift platform. Again, the view here is that could we take a full cloud native approach and layer it in on a rock solid base that could run on almost any dimension of cloud that you can think of. And then what we haven't publicized a lot of IBM, but has been really taking our time over the past two and a half years, has been taking our middleware and our core componentry and componentizing it as well. Our WebSphere, our MQ, our DB2, our Watson, our blockchain, we've been containerizing all of that to be run and managed in a Kubernetes environment. So the goal here, as we did in May, is to really continue to harden this stack up. We truly believe that a single stack that can run across all these dimensions are really going to give enterprises the capability that I can now move more workload to the cloud. I can weather the changes that we see on the horizon, remediate any issues with vendor lock-in, start to future-proof my applications, give me an easier way to train my staff, give me a better way to kind of move innovation in a faster direction across the enterprise. So that gives us a sneak peek. We still got a little bit of work to do with the government bodies, Department of Justice and the EU. Hopefully they keep up and running as fast as we can. But hopefully around summertime, second half, you'll see closure on this and you'll see more from us here as well. So I think we've kind of set the topic up, and I'm fortunate to have my CTO with me today as well, Bala Rajaraman. Bala's been instrumental with a lot of these technical directions that we've been on. I thought it'd be good to ask him a couple questions and get his perspective with how the market's changing as well. So Bala? Good to see you.
Thanks, Steve.
He goes by Bala. He's kind of like Beyonce and Prince. You know, he's so famous. He just needs one name and a mustache. That's all you need these days.
Yeah. I take this crap all the time, so.
So Bala, we talk about hybrid and multi. How do you see this shaping the landscape? I know you've talked to a lot of enterprises as they're kind of envisioning this as well, but maybe from a technical standpoint, is this really coming together?
Yeah, I think you made some very critical points. When I look at the market, I think we always tend to start from a technical perspective. I'd rather start from what are people trying to use cloud for? And really, there are two major changes that are happening. One of them is around digital transformation. People are building new applications, reaching clients in different ways, et cetera. And the second one is how they're enhancing their processes with data, with AI, with blockchain, and so on and so forth. So when you look at those phenomena that's happening from a business perspective, you quickly land up with the fact that not only do you need cloud as a location, but more importantly, you need cloud as an architecture. And the architecture around cloud is not only around building new applications, but it's also integrating with the processes and the data that you have on premise. And it becomes even more imperative when you have regulated industries. So that's kind of leading up to a hybrid model. And when you look at the progression of where innovation is coming from, it's coming across all clouds. There's innovation happening at the edge from an IoT perspective. Bringing that multi-cloud nature together to satisfy these business requirements is fundamentally where the market is changing. And that's the interesting part, is that it's not an easy change. I mean, it changes your processes, it changes your culture, it changes your skill profile, it changes the technology. So it's really a fascinating point in time.
Yeah. Now, we're not the only ones talking about hybrid. I think over the past year, almost every vendor has started to talk about their own notion there. What do you think the strengths are around this view of can a single platform span all of these dimensions? And we have a lot here today with the announcement we had with Red Hat, et cetera, but what are we going to need to fully build that vision out?
So, I mean, I think we've spent quite a bit of time thinking about it, and I think the entire landscape is evolving around it. But to me, the three most critical things from a hybrid or a multi-cloud perspective is, one, is the developer and the programming model. So how do you actually bring different components together? When we talk about hybridity, a lot of folks think about, hey, it's on-premise and off-premise. But there's much more fundamental requirements there. Things like you might have hybrid programming models. You might be building in traditional Java. You might be building using functions. You might be building using microservices. How do these things work together? What kind of flexibility does it provide? How do you actually create DevOps around it? How do you integrate using these various mechanisms? So the programming model is evolving significantly. The second thing, and perhaps for me, it's not DevSecOps, but it's OpsSecDev.
Yeah.
In the sense that the biggest inhibitor to agility tends to be management. So how do you actually manage the environment? How do you secure the environment? How do you monitor it? How do you provide SLAs? How do you do backup when you have a distributed environment? The notion of management around multi-cloud and hybrid cloud is becoming very critical. And the third, which is perhaps one of the trickiest things to handle, is data. How do you decompose your data to address things like microservices? How do you place your data? How do you move compute to data or data to compute? How do you take care of things like GDPR? So the governance notion, the performance notion, the placement notion of data to support how you build applications becomes absolutely imperative. So to me, those three things are the fundamental problems that need to be solved: programming models and integration, data, and management.
Good.
And there's lots of innovation happening in each of these areas.
Good. So we talked a little bit about the accelerants around this space, and I mentioned a little bit about open as well. Maybe your thoughts as well as to you've been involved in open source for a very long time, but it's kind of reaching kind of a new importance right now and almost a key rally point across the board. So maybe just a couple comments from you on the importance of open and how that's going to shape the future here.
Yeah, I mean, it's very fundamental. I think if you look at the landscape today, open is fundamentally the places where most of the innovation is happening. I think when you look at the collective, vendors like IBM, the partner community, the open source community, the open source developers, universities, a lot of the innovation, whether it's in cloud or AI, is happening in an open environment. And there are a lot of players in that space. Now, open is kind of reaching a very important threshold, which is as you look at scaling it across different clouds, much like the example you used around TCP/IP, you cannot do that without a set of established standards, a set of behaviors that are consistent across different clouds. One of the biggest transformations that happened here was Kubernetes. How do you have a portable standard model that gives you consistent behaviors across clouds? And when I go back to consistent behavior, it is consistency of what programming models are available on the cloud, what kind of security and governance is available, how can I manage things consistently. So the notion of open as a foundation becomes a key part of how multi-cloud and hybrid cloud applications can run, number one. And number two, how does it create an ecosystem across all of our partners, across all of the vendors, to really create the innovation, whether it is quantum, whether it's AI, and some of our initiatives on things like AI OpenScale. These are the things that are going to be engines of transformation. And open becomes a very critical part, and that was one of the key elements of why, given our history of openness and given Red Hat's history of openness, we brought that together in terms of how do we think about an open hybrid multi-cloud platform.
Yeah. Maybe one last question. We've got a very broad ecosystem here as well. What should they be viewing as their opportunity as this market tends to shape? We always talk about skills. There's never enough skills in cloud-native capabilities. But from the management side, the security side, we even hear some clients viewing this as the architecture for their next data center as well. So maybe your views there as to where does the opportunity lie?
I think there's 1 minute and 23 seconds.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I think that's kind of hard to answer that question. But I think this is kind of an important transition. I think the opportunity, to me, fundamentally goes back to the OpsSecDev point of view, which is we've been focused quite a bit in terms of how do you build these new applications. I think it's an important element. But when we scale beyond a subset of applications to really impact enterprises, I think the operational characteristics, the security characteristics, managing data, governing data, things like encryption, placement, become really important. And I view this really as the reemergence of the next generation of middleware. If you look at a lot of the conversation here, we talked about programming models. Used to be Java and Java EE kind of models. If you look at management and the standards emerging around that, Kubernetes becomes an important part of that. If you look at security and how do you federate security across these environments and how do you maintain it, you want to be able to provide people or the lines of business the capability to innovate very quickly. But at the same time, you have constraints from a regulatory perspective or a security perspective, from an IT perspective. How do you bring these worlds together? How do you manage it at scale? How do you skill people in building things like microservices or integrating with existing systems? Performance becomes a very interesting characteristic when you're actually splitting components across different clouds. So there's a whole bunch of technical innovations that are happening and need to happen in all of these spaces, whether it's programming models with things like Knative or microservices, whether you're talking about data encryption, distributed encryption, when you talk about things like management, all of these, we are just at the beginning of what is going to be an explosion of these technologies to manage this hybrid multi-cloud environment. So very excited about it.
Well, thanks to Bala, and thanks Ingram. Thank you for your time, and we really look forward to, I think 2019 is going to be a tremendous journey for IBM with the move with Red Hat, the direction on the new strategy, continuing to move our portfolio, and you are going to be helping us there to see this through as well. So again, thanks for the time. Have a great show, and appreciate the audience.
Thank you very much, guys.